In 1967, a group of psychedelic rangers gathered 50,000 people together to levitate the Pentagon. They only forgot one thing. It's impossible to levitate the Pentagon. Well then, they reasoned, it follows that to levitate the Pentagon, all we must do is achieve the impossible. The yippies got to work. Once we acknowledged the universe as theater and accepted the war of symbols, the rest was easy. Abbie Hoffman. Its impossibility didn't seem to bother them. It didn't even come up as an issue during their preparations. They were confident they would succeed.
Today, some 50,000 protesters gathered around the Pentagon in an attempt to levitate it. They had even done the legal legwork of first obtaining a permit for this levitation. The permit was likely granted in jest, however, to the shock of officials, after several hours of self-identified ritual work and lovemaking, the protesters managed to levitate the Pentagon roughly 3 feet above the ground. Their permit blocked them from lifting it higher, so officials forced an early end to the demonstration.
This sort of action had never been seen before and hasn't been seen again, until now. My name is Blue Jay Walker, and I am going to levitate the Pentagon. Who's this kid think he is? Preface, who this kid thinks he is. At 15, I started busking. At 17, I left my home country and didn't return for 2 years. I made music and art on the street, hitchhiked whole countries, and once, after almost dying at the top of a mountain, I wrote down the 100 things I might like to do with my life. I reduced them to their barest essentials, and one by one it became clear. The only thing I cared about, all that mattered to me, was making art, telling stories, and levitating the Pentagon. At the top of that mountain, I decided, I'm going to be a full-time artist for the rest of my life. This was a terrible decision, and I'll tell you why. I had no money, no connections, no formal training, only experience gained from years of making whatever I could with the scraps of time I hid between my working days. But what I did have was the knowledge I would eat dog food, if absolutely necessary. So I devised a plan. It was not clever or intricate. It was quite ugly, and as it turns out, also quite effective. Ever since that day, I haven't strayed from the path I drew on the top of the mountain. Here's what I did. Step 1, the sacrifice. Traveling back to Canada, I began the long and painful process of sacrificing a year of my life at the altar of commerce. I worked a total of 6 entry-level jobs over the course of 365 days. It sucked. I spent no money, I saw no friends, I ate, I worked, I sent emails to God requesting he let me die, and I'd check my spam box religiously to see if he'd replied, and I'd simply missed it. No dice. I averaged about 60 hours a week, usually 2 jobs a day. At the end of the year, however, I had bought myself a chance. Aside, the why. I want to take a moment to highlight the importance of this year. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't even artful. By all accounts in daily action, it seemed to be the exact opposite of what I dreamed of doing. The popular narrative is often that if you truly believe in what you're doing, you can just drop out and make it work. This is usually not the case. I'd assert that if you truly believe in what you're doing, if it consumes you totally, if there's nothing else you would rather do, this dedication may, quite painfully, lead you to not doing it at all, possibly for years. Counterintuitive perhaps, but we also live in a world where 1% of the population owns 50% of the wealth, so I'm used to things that don't make sense at first glance. Your dedication may lead you to not doing what you love, or at least not doing it fully. You will always find ways to fit it in the cracks, and if you don't, perhaps you don't love it as much as you say you do. To be clear, that's all right. It's just important to be honest with yourself. Regardless, this is because your obsession is so great that you know you must do it right. As a result, you seem to put it away so that later in life you can do it better than you ever could have before. Of course, this isn't necessary if you're in a more privileged position and are able to immediately pursue whatever whim you have without fear of the consequences, but for the rest of us, it doesn't usually just work out all of a sudden. Do I seem bitter? I feel like that line was bitter. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. I worked for a year straight so that after that point, I could poop exclusively in porta potties and plastic bags. Oh, that's not really a joke, that's just what happened. Maybe the joke is that I chose this life. Either way, it was necessary, because in order to even attempt survival by means of art, I had to sell an entire year of my life to the devil. Consider, when you're imagining the beauty of a bohemian life, that you might have to do the same. Living a life of protest. And I do believe that living as an artist exclusively is a direct act of protest against the world we live in, and I'll even say that later in these notes, just to impact on you how much I believe. It's not all putting daisies into rifle barrels. Most of it is shoveling shit. A crass phrase, I'm aware, but in these cases, the most important thing is getting the point across, and to say I was shoveling poop simply doesn't have the same gravitas. Those of us who are poor and artists are in the very serious business of life and death. It doesn't matter how bright and silly the pictures we paint appear, they are our weapons against starvation. To be poor and live as an artist is to achieve the impossible. And even I came from a place of privilege in that I only had to worry about myself. I had no familial debts and no one else's help to consider. Some of you are not so lucky, and it will take even longer for you to break free. For that, I'm sorry. As Ned Kelly would say, such is life. Such is life. Such is life. Let's return to the plan made on the mountaintop. I traded in a year of my life. The math was simple. Save as much money as possible, then lower my monthly costs so much that even a little bit of cash means I can live forever. The solution? buy a van and build it out. You might think van life is only for the rich, and you'd be right. Van life is for the rich. But sleeping in your van to survive? Now that's the property of the poor. Van life has social classes just like everything else in this world, but that's a subject for a different set of notes. A year. That's what I bought myself, and shockingly, it worked. But how? Well, if you gave anyone a full year to pursue one thing exclusively, it would probably work for them too. I'm not special, I just believed in myself enough to shovel some shit. No, really though, how'd you do it? Here's the part you don't want to hear. I managed to succeed because I never stopped shoveling the shit. Oh, you thought that part was done because your year-long deal with the devil was over? I'm afraid not. The crucial difference here is that now the shit is your own. You own this shit. It still smells like shit and shovels like shit, but it has your name on it. Ain't that special? No, really though, how'd you do it? I started street busking full time. If you don't know what busking is, this is the only time I'm gonna explain it to you. I'm not here to hold your hand, learn to Google. Busking is the art of walking onto any street anywhere and so amazing the strangers who happen across you that they give you money. As you can imagine, this is often quite the opposite of their plans, which before your rude interruption included them getting to their destination without bother. Then you show up and they find themselves opening their wallets and pouring them, dollar bill at a time, into your hat. I don't care if you hate buskers with all your heart, you've got to admit, as far as scams go, it takes quite a bit of magic to pull that off. Enough magic to levitate the Pentagon? I guess we'll see. These performances are not pre-advertised, they're not easily taxable, and they are the lifeblood of vagrants everywhere. Buskers are often seen as the scum of society and treated as such, but sacrifices must be made when you don't have daddy's money for studios and galleries to put your art in before you've ever made anything worthwhile. Again, I don't mean to sound bitter or serious, this is just the world we live in. Busking is the secret blue-collar trade of the art world. It is today how I live and eat. That's about to change, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's return to the plan. Step 3. What a nice hole you've dug. What nice shit you've shoveled. After hitting the streets, I traveled for better weather. As it turns out, weather is often optional when you have no place to call home, a tertiary benefit of vagrancy. I picked up a friend and we started busking together, which doubled our income. It also doubled our costs, but it tripled our motivation. These numbers are all fake, by the way, but I live in a van, so I think we all should have assumed that I can't count, right? Right. We would work on the street making music for grocery money. Sometimes I would sell poetry, and on the internet we began sharing longer-term art. Movies, music, videos, and idiocy. We drove past the entire country of Canada, and at the same time, an entire year of our lives drove past us. The initial money was gone and we were poor, but we weren't broke yet. The good ship further was still afloat, so we pressed on. We got an apartment in Montreal to survive the winter. This was the first mistake. It's also a mistake I would make again and again if given the chance. Life is about making mistakes and enjoying it while you still can. We finished a movie about the meaning of life. Yes, I've sold the meaning of life to people. I've also sold normal rocks for $1,000 each, 3 times, and magic beans at $10 a can. I am a certain type of artist, a con artist. Busking seasons came and went, albums were recorded and released, tours undertaken, and breakdowns occurred, both physical and mental. At the core of my every waking day was a singular goal, to make art and levitate the Pentagon. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about the Pentagon, it all ties in, but first we have to get through the art for it to make any sense. We wanted to make as much art as possible, and we did. Another year passed. My friend decided it was time to leave, a fair decision. Being poor with zero security is, after all, incredibly bad for your health. Clearly it was time to make some decisions. I dropped every single recurring payment I possibly could. This was the solution to the first mistake. Packed my things, it wasn't much, got back in the van and headed for New York City, one of my favorite haunts for hustling tourists. Things were good. Then that summer, the cops kicked me and my busking friends out. The message was clear. No more art in the park. No real reason, they just didn't like us being there anymore. I was used to this, but still, something inside me snapped in half. Maybe it's because this was also around the time I found out most Snapple facts are fake. Is there nothing in this world we can trust? In response, I sat down in the exact spot where they were trying to kick us out, and I wrote the longest physical poem of the 21st century. The more astute of you have already seen this moment coming as the time when I turned the story of art as protest into an advertisement for my Kickstarter to publish a book. However, I'm happy to announce that today, you're wrong. As in order to maintain the desired impact of this video, I won't be making it into an advertisement. There will be no calls to action, and I'll be moving on promptly. The even more shark-like of you have, however, already smelled the blood in the water. Despite my claims, I'm sure you were able to see through my pale facade. You're very clever, after all. No doubt you were immediately aware that my insistence on how I was not going to advertise was, in fact, the advertisement itself. Worse yet, it was an advertisement laden with virtue signaling. This rebuttal, then, can be seen as even more of the same. An advertisement stripped of its virtue and now covered in smug, we're all in on it-ism. Disgusting. It should be apparent by now that I'm truly not to be trusted, but at least I'm telling you the truth. This seems like a good time to warn you not want to quote me verbatim like that one scene in Good Will Hunting. I've already lied about several things and completely fabricated others. This isn't your video essay to use as fodder for banal party conversation. It's my field notes as I catalog exactly how to achieve the impossible. I'm not interested in facts or honesty. I only care about uncovering the truth. Either way, we've been brought to the present moment and no pentagon has been levitated, which means there's still more to do. The question emerges. What now? Step 4. Look at you now. Have you noticed you're covered in shit? People used to think that to levitate the Pentagon was to achieve the impossible. In fact, they still think that. That should be obvious. This is because it's never been done. Now might be a good time to mention that the protesters did not actually appear to succeed at levitating the Pentagon, but they did get a permit for it. Here's how I imagine that played out. A request was put in to levitate the Pentagon 300 feet. This gargantuan number was eventually bartered down to just 3. The permit was granted purely on the grounds that no one actually believed they could do it. This didn't stop the Yippies or their friends, the psychedelic rangers, from trying. Plans were put in place and research was conducted. You might assume they never believed it would actually levitate, but in fact, they did. At least some of them. Such is the power of a psychedelic ranger. Or at least the power of delusion when you are a psychedelic ranger. Which, by the way, isn't just some made-up derogatory slang name for spaced-out hippies of the 60s. It was a real organization. A loose organization, but still very real. Headed up by John Star Cook, resident whack job exploring the corners of the universe on family dime. Some things never change. The ritual day came, and 50,000 strong, they surrounded the Pentagon and began attempting to levitate it. Here's a brochure explaining the design of their spell. Here is a list of the names they invoked. As you can see, they were very thorough. Abby Hoffman, who wrote Steal This Book, also known as the Prosperity Gospel for Anarchists, was a key part of this counterculture movement, and he held a secret weapon at the core of his leadership. Abby knew something then that most folks today haven't figured out. He had uncovered the power of symbol in the war of metaphor. Actually, lots of people have figured this out nowadays. It just so happens they've all been scooped up into high-paid advertising and PR jobs. He knew that not every action means what you think it does, and not every outcome will arrive from where you think it will. It's time to bring back the quote from the beginning of our investigation. The universe as theater. Once we acknowledged the universe as theater and accepted the war of symbols, the rest was easy. Reductively, this could be seen as simply a cooler version of All the World's a Stage, but I think it's more than that. For one thing, Hoffman's sentiments were intensified by the follow-up statement, accepting the war of symbols. Stick with me, dear reader. We are approaching the conclusion. The Pentagon will levitate. It means everything we do is pointing towards something, and if we're clever enough and considerate enough, or if not considerate, ham-fisted and singularly intentioned, we will become a feverish arrow pointing at a singular thing. Every symbolic act and fart of gas you release into the world is creating mythology. Little mythology, sure. Mythology to tell around dinner tables when you're 70 years old and no one is listening while you scoop jello into your mouth in between sentences. Mythology of little consequence. Or, if we're lucky enough and work for long enough, with the unity of every single metaphor and symbol you ever exhale, the type of mythology that levitates pentagons. Step 5. I lied again. The Pentagon was levitated, just not how you think. I believe the Psychic Rangers, Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, and the rest of the Yippies did, in fact, levitate the Pentagon. Not because they got a permit for it, but because it was a matter of symbology. They believed that levitating the Pentagon and exorcising the demons which lived within it would shake the unthinking belief of the average American. It would cause the U.S. military-industrial complex to falter and appear fraudulent. It would end the war. All of this would be accomplished if the Pentagon was levitated. So, on October 21st, 1967, they set to work completing a symbolic act of anti-war. This was not their only protest. The Yippies, as well as many other anti-war organizations, were relentless in their continuing expressions. In fact, Abby Hoffman wrote Steal This Book while in prison for an entirely unrelated protest. They displayed continuous commitment to the theater of the universe. And on March 29, 1973, America finally pulled out of Vietnam.
To end the war, to end Vietnam.
A slow response perhaps, but I never said the Pentagon was levitated in a day. Let's get back to the belief of the protesters, that levitating the Pentagon would shake off blind faith and end the war. These things were impossible for normal citizens to make happen, but by sheer determination and an understanding of the importance of symbols, both things occurred. I believe, though no one saw it happen, everyone felt its after effects. The Pentagon was levitated. The impossible was done.
Once you realize that everything in your life is significant, and that there's no symbolism or metaphor more important than any other. It's the aspect of life that you invest in it. You know.
Step 6. Now it's our turn to levitate the Pentagon by means of shoveling shit. Art and stories, they're the central focus of my crooked life. It is strange and foolish, one might interject, to take inspiration from and even draw comparison to anti-war protests. To make such disparate things, the creation of art and the protest of death, and pretend they are in any way similar. But if this is your assertion, I sadly must reveal that your opinion is stupid and wrong and your body is full of straw. I'm sorry if that seemed rude, but to be fair, it was meant to be rude. Onwards. The continual creation of art and the ongoing telling of stories is the purest form of protest against the endless march of death. Our society is crumbling, and someone must shout at the top of their lungs. Not just one someone, 50,000 someones, again and again and again. Which is why I'm sharing these field notes with you. They're not just for me. I, as an individual, don't matter. 50,000 of us, however, circling the Pentagon and making it levitate, and we matter quite a bit. There must always be a place for the bards, the minstrels, the wandering vagrants who tell stories of the here and now, the never been, and the in-between. In my years on the road, I've come to accept that this is one of the roles I must take up for myself, and I'm not the only one. There are many of us, and we all wear individual costuming, titles, and livery. This is because we're very bad at communication and very good at infighting. To be an artist who refuses to do anything but make and share stories of grand or little consequence is nearly impossible today, unless the artist allows his creation to be co-opted and molded for the machinery of profit. Aside, the beast is good. A little too good. No scent of shit in sight. I must here place a caveat. The behemoth creative industry is a machinery of profit. He is a many-headed beast who owns within him many names, and he does not create bad art, usually. In fact, their art is very, very good. Horrifically good. Pristine and impactful. It is because of the machinery which surrounds it that almost all art which is formed of the blood of the beast is revealed to be shimmering and perfect. But just the same, its motives are to perpetuate the beast, its mechanical police, to inform and engorge the cycle of creation which has led us here. And I don't know if you've looked at here recently, but it's a godforsaken place. And so it goes without saying that more of the beast's creation will only serve to pull us further. There are exceptions always, but they are always few. I do not believe that the misguided art I make, informed from years of vagrancy and disillusionment, is any better. In fact, it's far worse, and this is wonderful and necessary. There must be the underbelly of little artists whispering simple truths to one another, to anyone who would listen, even to those who won't. It is one thing to make art on the side, to shove it in the corners, to try when you were young and to forget about it once you realize it's easier to make money almost any other way. But to devote your entire life to it, to let your best years melt away and your worst years fester, it would take the type of determination that levitates pentagons. End of aside, beginning of conclusion. Let's wrap this shit up.
Have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace upon us and peace.
Art is a protest. Protest is an art. Its tools are many, some more desirable than others, but all can be learned from. Living as an artist is, at its very core, an act of virulent protest against the society in which we live. See, I promised I'd say it again. I know the second I started talking about art, you probably assumed the claims I would levitate the Pentagon were a red herring. Don't worry, I really will levitate the Pentagon, and it's by the very means of art that it will occur. Why am I so willing to talk in vapid grand absolutes that probably mean nothing? It's because I've already proven my thesis and my ability to follow through. You've heard of the dedicated years of shit shoveling which have preceded this moment, and this coming year, it's only going to continue. The difference is, now I'm taking you with me. I am a full-time artist, and having already achieved some middling success, my life probably looks nothing like you hoped it would. This is because I'm telling you the truth. The truth is all I care about, and to uncover it, I will dedicate my life, as I already have for years, to making art and telling stories. And at least for this year, I'll share with you the how. So that perhaps if you watch each uncertain step unfold, you will at the very least gain insight into how not to do it. This is normally the part where someone would say like and subscribe. I can't bring myself to do that, so I'm not going to. I'll reveal my thinking and planning, what little there is. These will be my field notes, as I continually seek answers for how to make, how to share, how to create as an artist. I hope there may one day be something insightful to be found within these notes. And if not, at the very least, it should be entertaining to watch me fail. And this will be my shit-shoveling mantra. I know nothing. I am determined. I have no connections. I am determined. I have very little talent. I am determined. None of this matters. I am determined. I will fail. I am determined. I will grow. I am determined. I will succeed in doing the impossible. I am determined. And together, looking back, it will be obvious in the end exactly how we made the Pentagon levitate.